after a period of time there, getting close to the evening here of the fourth day, then we see planes flying over at 30,000 feet or so, but no one's looking for us. And all of a sudden, we hear a plane, and I holler out McKissick, I hear a plane, I hear a plane. And he likewise said, yeah, I see a plane. Look, there he is. And here's a plane, looks like it's just going to fly directly over us, but he's flying about 8,000 feet. Well, we had renewed vigor, and we are splashing water. We're yelling. We're doing everything imaginable to attract his attention, but if he knew we were down there and we had, so to speak, deer hunter orange on, no way that he could see us. Actually, he's flying about 8,000 feet. He's looking forward to him about 4 miles. He's looking out in his peripheral vision on each side about 2.5 miles each. So he's looking at 20 square miles to see a man's head down here 6 by 8 inches. But I like to say that in the providence of God, he saw us, because here's what was happening. We see him, and he comes in on a dive. He starts with a dive, and we see, we just thank you, Lord. He sees us. Rescue is coming, at last. And here he's coming in. But let me back you up just a bit. Lieutenant Gwynn flying there about 8,000 feet. He's had trouble with his radio antenna. The little trailer behind that aircraft, and the aircraft, a little Ventura, I call it a B-25. It's a land-based plane. He can't land in the water. But here he's going to fly directly over us. And we are waving. We're so excited. He has gone aft, and he's turned the controls over to the co-pilot. And he said he's going to go aft, and he opens the bomb bay door momentarily, and he's going to reel in that antenna. He's going to put a stabilizer on it. And so as he opened the bomb bay door, he glances down momentarily, just kind of glances down like 8,000 feet and sees the water down below, and he sees an oil slick. As he sees the oil slick, in his mind, there's a submarine down there. And so what does he do? He rushes back to take over controls of the plane, and the crew know that he has seen something. They yell out to him, what is it? What is it? Of course, all the sound of the motors, and he says, look down there. Well, they look down there. What do they see? An oil slick. But Lieutenant Gwynn then has them to load the bombs, because in his mind that oil slick represents an enemy submarine down there. So he's loaded his bombs. He comes in on a bombing run. We're waving. We're so excited he sees us, but he hasn't seen us. Now, as he starts in on his bombing run, all of a sudden he's down close enough that he sees down in the water, he could see massive sharks. He sees sharks attacking boys. And as he comes down, he sees a boy just being completely mutilated, by the sharks. And so he comes down, then doesn't drop a bomb, but he comes down and circles us then a time or two. And I can see him today as he goes around McKissick and myself 2 or 3 times, and he tilts those wings and basically saying, I see you, don't know who you are, but I see you, and I'll be calling for help. And then after a moment or two, then I see him, he goes up, and he's still circling, but he goes up over us. And I thought, well, what's he going up there for? Well, actually, he was having trouble with his antenna, and he goes up higher to where his antenna then would help him to reach out then with his plane, with his radio. And then he radios back at Palau to announce that ducks on the pond. Now, he didn't know whose ducks we were, but anyway, there's boys out there. And then as he radios back then to Palau, there was a Navy lieutenant by the name of Adrian Marks, and Marks then was a pilot of a PBY, and he was to go out on a search and destroy for submarines, and basically he had his instructions, and here he's getting nearly to his plane. The plane had already been warmed up, ready for he and his crew to get in, and he gets that word, that there's boys out there and there's sharks, etc. And so he gets in the plane, and he knows where he's to go, and he's rushing out the fastest way that he can. He gets out to where we are, and likewise, now he sees that we're scattered over a 75-mile area, and he sees sharks attacking boys. He said he saw maybe 30 boys and more than 30 sharks attacking the boys. So he calls back at Palau, and he asks permission to do a landing. And they tell him, no way do you open sea landing in a PBY. Now the waves, we like to think that they were maybe 10 or 12 foot swells, so you don't land a plane like that. But he and his crew says, "We've got to land. Look, there's sharks down there, just all kinds of sharks, mutilating the bodies." And so he asks permission again. He tells them that the sharks are eating the boys, and they tell him no, but he just hangs up the phone. And he and the crew says, "We've got to land." So he takes that big goose and he brings it down and he hits that first swell. It went up in the air 50 feet or so, and then he bounced it several times before he finally got it landed. He tore up one of the motors, ruptured the pontoon a little bit, but he finally set that big goose down, and then he begins to run the swells and picking up stragglers, and he picked up McKissick, and then later he picks up me. Now, there's no way that he could take the props and go against the swell. He had to run back and forth to where he could turn and go. And so then after a period of time, though, he picked up, several boys, and then he picked me up, and I get aboard the plane. They take me like a sack of feed, drag me in. The plane is still moving, and they reach out and get me. I think the guy that threw me in the plane was, 6 foot or 9 foot something. Anyway, I think of him as being a giant the way that he picked me up and put me in, but he wasn't that kind of a man at all. But anyway, he put me in the plane, and now they take me like a sack of feed, and they stack me here. The next guy stack him against him, and they picked up 56 boys. Well, the plane won't hold 56 boys, but he tied 7 out on the wings. Now, he knew that the plane couldn't take off ever, and so any way that he could put a body or two, And then when I got aboard the plane, then after a little bit, I look across the plane and I see USMC, I see Spooner, I see those sore eyes. And he's reaching down on the deck of the aircraft. He has a can of green beans, and he's finding a little stud bolt or something down there, and he's hacking away, and finally he knocks a hole in that can of green beans. He turns it up, and he's drinking some of the bean juice, and I see that, and I asked Spooner for some of his bean juice. Well, you'd have to know Spooner, but he kind of told me where I could get off, and I said, "Spooner, you don't know who this is. This is Harrell." Well, I was his squad leader, and frankly, he had been shanghaied out of 3 different outfits before he came aboard the Indianapolis. And Captain Parks had told me when he came aboard, he said, "Harrell said, your squad is 1 man short, and you inherit Spooner, and here's the history. And you do not allow him to bring reproach to the Marine Corps aboard the ship. I don't care what you have to do to him," and he meant it. He said, "If you have to throw him overboard, but don't let him bring reproach on the Marine Corps." So anyway, here's Spooner, and when I tell him who I am, well, he kind of falls over the buddy between us and shares some of the bean juice with me. Well, the rest of the story basically is being rescued that night with a destroyer coming in to pick us up, the USS Doyle, and I ended up then going down to Palau to makeshift. That was the closest hospital for. Maybe I was there a day and a half. Then I catch a hospital ship in the USS Tranquility. They bring me to a little better hospital in Guam. I'm in the hospital in Guam for, I think I was there in there 3-4 weeks or so. Then I go to a CB camp to kind of recoup. And then after a period of time, then finally we catch an aircraft carrier and we come back to the States. We got back to the States on October the 2nd. I'd been overseas a good period of time, so I have a 30-day leave coming, rehabilitation leave because of some injuries that I had, and so on. So I had a 90-day leave. So I thought, man, I'll be home for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for New Year's, etc. And so I was prepared to leave for home on the 4th of October. But on the 3rd of October, I ended up in Balboa Hospital. I had a perforated appendix. I went kind of into sick bay. They checked me in emergency. They rushed me to Balboa Hospital. And I get there, then they take my blood count, and they basically say, "We can't operate now." All of that poison had leaked out in my system. And it was 29 days later, 11,800,000 units of penicillin later, before they could operate. And they operated, and it was successful. And I didn't get out of the hospital until January the 16th. Then I had sufficient points to get out. The war was over by now, and I think you asked me earlier, when did I find out, what we were carrying? Well, I found that out on the 6th of August when they dropped the first atomic bomb. So finally, I got out, got out of the Marine Corps on February the 17th, 1946. So that's basically my story.